Superman is not only the most iconic Western fictional character of all time, but also one with the most versions. Think about it. How many Superman alternate takes have there been? There's been a Soviet Superman, an evil Superman, a Superman who turned gold after decades of solar radiation, and a lot more. However, writer Jason Aaron picks up the Superman title and revamps it with this take called Absolute Superman, which focuses on the character arriving on Earth as an adult rather than a child. Readers familiar with the character can already pick up the differences in the way Krypton was handled. In most iterations, this planet is depicted as beautiful, peaceful, and with a strong sense of order, but this version shows a lack of emotions and a ruthless nature that permeates the entire structure. In a lot of ways, Aaron harkens back to what John Byrne did in the mid-80s with the Man of Steel miniseries, which was a reboot of the Superman comics. The Krypton that was depicted there was peaceful, albeit lacking connections and true emotions, thus emphasizing the contrast that Kal-El was going to find on Earth. In that regard, Aaron ups the ante and creates a much colder and darker society, perhaps as a reflection of what's trendy in comics these days. This gets further emphasized by Superman's early narrations in this comic, showcasing how his parents are farmers working and struggling to survive since there's a notorious lack of rain here. Even that legendary logo that Superman wears on his chest changes its origin, going from traditionally being the crest of the House of El to being a brand for those commoners who labor with their own two hands, as the comic states. Again, most fans will realize that this is a major departure from the established lore, since Jor-El is often depicted as the scientist who warned people of Krypton's fall, which is something that the writer does here, but with a kind of a twist. He examines the inner workings of the land of Krypton to search for stress fractures, but doesn't find any. However, as they keep researching, they begin to find radiation, and Jor-El wants to stop the mining but gets ignored, resulting in most of his colleagues dying in the process and him barely surviving. We then switch to Brazil in what is presumably the modern day, years after Superman escaped Krypton's doomed fate. In just a couple of pages, Aaron already presented a much more flawed and self-destructive nature of Kryptonian society, which is something that is bound to divide opinions, but certainly offers a different take on arguably the most legendary origin story of all time. Now the story goes on to focus on this group of miners in the South American country who are forced to continue digging for diamonds while being exposed to asbestos, which is a chemical substance that can cause cancer, thus emphasizing how these workers are pushed to their absolute limits in this high-risk, highly dangerous situation, while drawing a parallelism with what Jor-El went through. Jason Aaron takes the time to highlight through Superman's narrations that these miners are paid very little when compared to the money the Lazarus Corporation, their superiors, is going to make with all of these diamonds. There's a very detailed panel where the Man of Tomorrow states that while the money they make isn't enough, they're not doing it out of greed, but rather for their family, much like he does. This is the first time the character of Superman is actually a player in the plot, as the miners go down to dig in the cave and realize that the diamonds are already good to go, which was obviously done by Kal-El. The workers then explain that there have been rumors of a person, or a group of people even, traveling across the world and doing similar acts, but regardless, one of the miners highlights that this isn't their problem and they need to head to the surface to deliver the diamonds. The most interesting part here to me is that the miners don't take any of the diamonds. How many of you guys down below in the comments can say that you would do the same thing? I really don't know if I could. Whether it's out of fear of being punished, concerns of losing their jobs, or simply just out of respect and having integrity and playing by the rules. This comic never gives a proper explanation, but it's likely that it's meant to represent basic human decency and how even doing extremely demanding and overwhelming work that could kill them, they maintain their principles and integrity as honest people. Then there's a flashback of the previous night, as that one worker who is seen talking to a man wearing a hoodie who is obviously Kal-El. This version of the character is not the, I guess, godlike figure who flies across the skies, but rather a much more subdued and quieter individual starting to engage with this miner about morality and exactly what drives them. Rather than working as a pretentious piece of the dialogue that could feel out of place at times, this moment serves to highlight how the miner, and by extension the exploited worker, doesn't have time to think of complex moral topics. They're more so taking these dangerous jobs because they don't have anything else to do to provide for their families, which is a take that Superman, who views this planet as your world rather than feeling a part of it, appreciates greatly. The story goes back to the present and shows how the security force of the Lazarus Corporation, based on the Peacemaker character, is mistreating some of these miners. These military men have realized that the diamonds were not mined through the usual process and know that there is an anomaly going on here, which is why they begin to torture and hurt the workers until someone speaks up and tells them the truth. Eventually they realize that only one worker is missing, and that happens to be Superman, who is hiding in a really specific place. Now, here's another major change that Jason Aaron has made, and this is how Kal-El recharges with solar radiation. The character now becomes a lot more sun-starved, as per his own words, than in the more popular versions of his, which means that he needs a lot more time to rest and recover after exerting himself like we're about to see him do here. Unfortunately, right now he doesn't have the time for that, as he begins to be attacked by the Peacemakers and has to fight back, with the comics showing his abilities for the first time and overpowering his opponents. This chapter also highlights that the Man of Steel has a cybernetic communicator talking to him, although the story is yet to confirm what it is or how it works, but is very likely to be of Kryptonian origin. It's then shown that the Lazarus Corporation had a special military force keeping track of Superman and his actions all over the world, starting to notice his patterns and modus operandi. As they overwhelm their target, the Kryptonian is fighting with reckless abandonment and decides to unleash solar radiation to destroy the enemies around him. Now, this is a really good moment to highlight the similarities between Absolute Superman and the New 52 Superman, which have a lot of things in common. Both Jason Aaron and Grant Morrison wanted to streamline the character of the Man of Steel and focus on making him a lot more grounded, making him someone who fights for the little man, I guess you could say, in a less grandiose way. Even harkening back to the early days of the character in the late 30s, with both of these recent versions having the ability to unleash solar radiation almost as if it were a nuclear bomb of sorts. He takes the opportunity, while weakened, to tell the miners to take the diamonds and leave, with the hope of someone buying them from him. However, this is when he's quickly surrounded by the people of the Lazarus Corporation and subdued, with a woman putting handcuffs on him that can weaken him. It turns out that the lady who works for these special forces is Lois Lane. Jason Aaron really did his homework in this situation, since Lois's father was always associated with the military, so having her character involved in this type of organization makes a degree of sense without feeling that the story has kinda jumped the shark, I guess you could say. Moreover, it also presents the possibility of developing a potential relationship with this version of Superman, although it's still very early stages in the story to make that assumption. This issue then even has a dialogue of sorts where there's a character who is obviously Brainiac looking at several screens showing Superman and the former being fascinated by him. Nothing has been confirmed, but it's very likely that this version of the character is a human who managed to experiment on himself and turn into this entity, although this is mere speculation at the moment. Perhaps one of the most heartbreaking moments for a lot of fans is this small sequence that shows the house of Jonathan and Martha Kent in Smallville, which has been demolished and belongs to the Lazarus Corporation. This is actually a version of the Kent family that never met Clark, which is something that's definitely going to sadden a lot of the longer term fans of the character, and that was probably Aaron's intention the whole time, right? This introduction to Absolute Superman ends with a flashback of Kal-El's parents in Krypton, meeting up with him and the dog Krypto in the red lands of the planet. Yeah, my boy Krypto is here, man. It's a tender moment that highlights the concept of family unity despite the utter chaos that is Krypton at the time, and also what the protagonist had before the current state of affairs in the series. It's very clear that Krypton was destroyed, but the way Aaron has constructed the story thus far generates a lot of curiosity. What happened to the Kryptonians? How Kal-El managed to escape, and why his parents didn't go with him? The writer took what was one of the most iconic and known origin stories of all time and managed to inject some new life into it, giving the readers a potential mystery that could elevate the source materials to some degree, so huge shout out to Jason Aaron. However, this is still just a theory and it could go for a more classic resolution. It's the early stages and a lot has to be explained, but Absolute Superman has a really interesting premise with the very basic question of how Kal-El would have been if he had arrived on this planet as an adult. Jason Aaron has taken some risks with the changes from the classic mythos of the franchise, but this being an alternate take from a different universe, be that as it may, Absolute Superman has shown a lot of promise in terms of what it could achieve. Presented a lot of interesting questions and has the potential to surprise anyone who had initial doubts about it, but so far, I'm really enjoying Absolute Superman, and I hope you guys are as well. Do not worry, very soon I'm going to be going over Absolute Batman as well. I think I might potentially be enjoying that story a little bit more, but it's probably just because I'm a bigger Batman fan. But don't worry, fellas, we're going to be going over the entire Absolute universe at some point, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Comics, both Marvel and DC, are really killing it right now, and I enjoy reading this stuff and going over it with you guys, so I hope you all are enjoying the content as well. But anyways, fellas, let me know down below in the comment section if there are any specific comics that you guys want me to go over. It doesn't matter if it's Marvel or DC, I'll be sure to check them out. But anyways, fellas, have a great day. I'm gonna see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.